Percy Jackson and the Olympians is a new show on Disney Plus and adapts Rick Riordan's famous young adult series to television. This has been adapted before to film form. There were two movies that came out in the 2010s. I'll talk more about those in a second, but this essentially adapts the first book in the series, The Lightning Thief. In this story, Percy, played by Walker Scobell, learns that the world of Greek mythology is not really a myth at all, and everything that's been talked about in those texts is real. And as he becomes more and more a part of that world, realizing that he is a half-blood and also the son of a god, he has to take on a quest that involves retrieving Zeus's lost master bolt. Now, like I said, this has been adapted before in film form. The first movie I remember watching, in fact, right after I read the first book. That's when I actually started getting into it, and I read up until The Last Olympian. I also read the first 3 Heroes of Olympus books. I will finish that at some point down the line. I know Rick Riordan is still writing, but at the time I remember seeing the first movie and thinking there's some decent things in it, even though it makes a lot of changes to the actual material, but there were some not so great things, but overall it was alright. The second movie, on the other hand, I honestly think is one of the worst YA movies, and it completely botched that entire, canon which they were working with. But do you know who didn't like either of the movies? Rick Riordan. In fact, he was very, very upset, and so the show has very direct involvement from him. And you can tell, because despite the fact that there are things that are tweaked and there are some revised things in the show, it does follow the book very, very closely. The overall structure of it is very much present in the DNA of this season. Almost to the dialogue, in fact, and even the way things are delivered. Percy has a very, snide, very, toned down version of reacting to things. He'll look at certain things and just be like, I guess that's a thing, whatever, I don't know about this, and that's represented in his character quite well. And Walker Scobell, who previously I'd seen in the Adam Project, and I thought he was really good in that, is very good here. He does a good job of bringing Percy to life in a pretty solid way, and as the show progresses, as the book does too, his performance only improves because his character is also getting more and more acquainted into this world and understanding how things work. Suddenly things that seemed so bizarre feel normal to him, and they don't seem like these far-fetched ideas. Annabeth, played by Leah Jeffries, is unfortunately a casting that got some controversy here on this very website, because I'll give you 3 seconds to figure out what happened there. And I thought she did good. I think she captured the essence of Annabeth really, really well, and I really liked her progression throughout the season as well. There's a lot more, friendship stuff between Percy and her as compared to the book. Like in the book, it builds along the way, in the series especially, but over here, there's a much tighter bond already between them. Eventually, if you read the books, you know where that's going. Grover, played by Aryan Sindri, I thought he was also really, really good. I honestly didn't have a problem with the 3 lead performances. They did a very, very good job. The entire world that has been created around it is also very interesting. The way they've represented Greek mythology and the characters, the gods in human forms coming down to meet them or running into them as things happen. It's done quite nicely. There are some changes, like I said, that have been made. One of the biggest changes I found was Medusa. In the book, she's very angry and violent, and we immediately get into the action with that character. But in the show, they decide to take a slightly more sympathetic approach and try to understand the tragedy of her and how she ended up as she has, which I thought was a cool idea. It made certain decisions eventually, where that's going. It made it a lot more, you had there was a bittersweet aspect to it. It's like, yeah, I feel bad, but at the same time, you have to remember she's kind of turned, dozens of creatures into stone by just looking at them. So there is that to it too. But then the tragedy of the fact that she's cursed to become that is also not exactly a fun thing. So I like the way the show plays around with that. One of the other changes is that when they get to the Lotus Hotel in the book, you eat the flower and it makes you forget, and then it eventually puts you into that trance mode and having fun in the hotel. In the show, they removed that by essentially going for an even better thing, which was they just pump it into the air. You walk in, that ventilators are just like letting that thing loose, which I thought, okay, yeah, Sure, that makes perfect sense. Both of them have adaptations, at least have, one thing in common. There is a famous singer opening up that scene. In the movie version, it was Lady Gaga. In this, it's Dua Lipa. This is not the only video of the week where Dua Lipa will come up, by the way. The visual style of the show, sometimes I was a little mixed on. There were moments where I think it looks really, really good, but there's a couple of episodes where it does feel like they really made it very murky. Some things don't look quite as good, like especially some parts of like the descent into hell, which is the penultimate episode. There are some moments which look great, and there are some that very much are very desaturated, lose all color. I'm not expecting hell to be a vibrant place with rainbows, of course not, but I think the thing I'm trying to go for is like, just there wasn't anything very distinctive that was like, oh, this is hell. I feel like some of that does kind of get lost in that. Regardless, for the most part, I mean, in a lot of cases, the visual effects are pretty good. It's a good looking show for the most part. The music by Bear McCreary, really good as well. Again, the dry sense of humor and stuff that comes through with the characters and the writing, very much present over here. Again, taking from the books, you definitely have that over here. So in that way, like I said, there's not much problem when it comes to those aspects. Where I do think that this season could have been a little bit better, though, is when it comes to some other, filmmaking things, like, for example, pacing. I think the first half of the season definitely has growing pains, which you can make the argument that the book has the same thing, but when there are already tweaks and additions being made, and those are already fine-tuning aspects of the book from earlier, I don't see why certain other pacing things could have been a little more fixed up or maybe done a little bit more so. And sometimes what happens is, as a result of that, a few sequences early on feel very glacial. Like there is a sense of tension at points where you think, okay, now I should be ramping up to that. And it doesn't feel like it goes into that as well as it could. And as a result of it, there were some episodes that just kind of felt like we're going along until the fun stuff comes along, which, again, you could say the book does the same thing. But I feel like I was much more in the book right out the gate than I was with the show. But at the same time, there are moments between those where they sprinkle in a few details that I really did appreciate. Percy's favorite color being blue, one of them. Everything that he has is blue. There's a point where he has blue pancakes, and yep, that's great. The offerings to the gods, the burnt offerings at Camp Half-Blood was really, really good. I thought they did a very nice job in incorporating those little sprinkles of, references throughout. Annabeth calling him Seaweed Brain after a while. That was great. Very nicely done as well. Grover wanting to go on the quest for Pan. They adapted a lot of those things well. It's just there are times, especially in that first half of the season, where I think they could have been a little better structured and a little more tightly written and paced. The second half of the show, which I thought was far more entertaining, and in fact I watched the last few episodes in one straight flush. I think I think it could have had a little more of that momentum. That being said, I did enjoy Percy Jackson and the Olympians season 1 overall. I don't think it's the best it could have been, but I think it's definitely on the path to becoming better and better. I'm assuming season 2 is Sea of Monsters. I mean, there's a dialogue which practically hints at that happening, and that's not going to be a surprise to anybody. It's much smaller, the book, though, if I remember correctly. I think it's, the second one and the third one they're not as big, so maybe they might just combine aspects of those two. I don't know. But I am excited to see where else they're going to go with this adaptation, and I hope that the fans of the novels have been enjoying it as well. I'm going to give Percy Jackson and the Olympians season 1 a B+. Like I said, overall quite happy with the season. Just could have been a little better at parts. Sorry for the radio silence this month. It's been such a quiet January, not a lot of videos. You guys have probably been like, this guy's not doing anything. I'm here, and looking forward to doing a lot more very, very soon. Very exciting month coming up, especially. There's going to be a lot more. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. And then as always, if you like this, please do subscribe. And I will see you guys. and a very happy streaming. See, this is what happens when you go off for a while. You forget the TV exit. There's a different one. Anyway, see you guys later.